So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Philip Wade here from the Universal Studio in North Yorkshire, England. It's continued to be very cold here in the UK. We had snow yesterday, which was a bit surprising after 20-degree temperatures last week, but there you go, all good. And I just felt really compelled to share today what's on the screen there, the title, Jumping to Conclusions, Not Knowing and Self-Realization. And the principal focus, although I'll give a number of examples of the first part, is about the importance in spiritual self-realization of not knowing, the importance of not knowing. But I want to start with some discussion and insight around jumping to conclusions. It kind of happens quite a bit in life, as I'm sure we've all experienced. And it was particularly noticeable yesterday in a live stream that I did, which had a very specific title for a very clear reason. And even before I'd started the live, i.e. I had started speaking, and the title was up there on the screen, the music was still playing, probably about a minute in, somebody had already leapt in, reaching a conclusion about what this particular live was going to be about, without giving a second thought to that there might be a good reason for this particular title. And if you want to see yesterday's, you can do. It was actually called Falling in Love is Falling into the Mystery. And there was a very good reason for that title, because it was based on a game we used to play as children, called Falling in Love, where you would fall backwards into people's arms and they would catch you. And it was about the relevance of that and the process of trust that required to trust required in spiritual self-realization. So that was interesting. And it happened again on that same live, where somebody else who, from what I established, hadn't actually watched and listened to the live, and also reached a conclusion that was actually irrelevant to what was being discussed. And this actually happens a lot in life, and it happens, interestingly, also at the self-realization events. And the not knowing part is really fundamental to self-realization. But just a couple of other examples, I've seen discussions taking place. One was with, I'm not going to name names because it's not about criticizing people, it's more about being open to not knowing. But a very high profile, let's say, scientist in the UK, and a very, very high profile person in the spiritual world, from originally in India, now living in the US. And the spiritual guy, was pointing out, in essence, the primary nature of consciousness. And the well-known physicist used a phrase that went along the lines, cosmic consciousness, my arse. And I've actually seen other scientists doing that as well. And of course, it's been known for millennia by realized beings that it is in fact consciousness that is primary. And no, it doesn't arise in the brain. It's actually consciousness that gives rise to beingness and form. And actually trying to present a knowing that you actually know otherwise from a scientific perspective, there will be no scientific paper or research that will ever find that consciousness arises in the brain. It's just not so. But again, I'm not seeking to argue about that. What I'm pointing to is there's a massive conclusion that's been jumped to there in science that actually leads to a problem with opening up scientific research into the fields of consciousness, which will ultimately in the future be very important. It happens in politics, it happens in business. I used to be in business in my previous life, and the amount of conclusions that were jumped to in that industry were quite staggering. People just not listening to what's being said. And it also happens at spiritual events where people think that they know something about this self-realization, and actually are coming from a place of bias or from a more limited understanding. Now, when it comes to spiritual self-realization, if you think that you know, you do not. It's as simple as that. If you think that you know, you do not. You see, all of the insights that are being shared in the context of spiritual self-realization, it might look like it's coming from somebody you perceive to be a teacher, a master, a guru, or whatever. But that is not actually the case. That is not actually the case. The true master, guru, and if you want to use the word teacher, and it's not a word I like, for which are reasons I'll explain shortly, is actually coming from the awareness that we all collectively are, and it's not a personal knowing. It's not a personal knowing, nor is that awareness in any way, shape, or form personal. It's actually an unfiltered expression of the knowingness and the intelligence of the universe, that if we allow ourselves to get the personhood out of the way, the identity as the body-mind, and the thinking that our worldview is the right one, and the belief that we are separate from other beings, when that is out of the way and dissolved, this innate flowering and knowing simply arises. It just simply arises, and there's no personal aspect to it whatsoever. And yet it can have a uniqueness in its expression. But as I've said many times on live streams, words at best are an honest lie. Silence at worst is a naked verity. And it's allowing the purity of that silence to arise and express itself, the knowingness, the intelligence of the universe, in an unfiltered way that creates an energetic signature in the vibration of the presence of those words, those pointings, those indications, those insights that will actually transport you beyond the words to a recognition of that which was always known, that which you in fact already are. It's not through a conscious process of understanding that the realization of the self flowers. It's through the allowing of this arising to dissolve the identity, and then that knowingness, that intelligence, that awareness takes center stage. And yes, the cognitive processes are still there, but now they're acting in service of the deepest knowing of the universe itself, not some learned knowledge. And the reason I don't like the word teacher when it comes to this is because ultimately there is nothing to learn. It's our realization, and hence the term self-realization. And this self is totally non-personal, as infinite silence or infinite awareness. So we've all had realizations, aha moments, the light bulb moment when a seeing has happened. And the realization of the self is the biggest OMG or light bulb moment in the universe. It's a recognition by awareness of awareness as itself as awareness. And that's why the term realization is there. And so it's very, very important in the context of this, if you truly seek peace, is to truly being open to the actual fact that you do not know. I feel particularly blessed in that regard because having had a, should we say, the unique journey that manifested in the form of Philip, one thing that became clear to me pretty quickly is actually I absolutely didn't know anything. And staying with that, amongst with the inner commitment, the commitment to the inner calling, actually proved to be incredibly fruitful. Just this simple awareness that one did not actually know. And actually, as a practice, I'll also add here that stays here with me now, even this every day. Head goes on the pillow at night, and there's just this complete gratitude, stillness for not actually knowing anything. Philip doesn't know anything about this, and yet the flowering of awareness can emerge through this form, your form, if one is simply open to this not knowing. And so it's really fundamental as far as spiritual self-realization is concerned, not to jump to conclusions, not to think that you know. And even in any pointing and sharing I am doing here now, it's not through the cognitive process that the realization will flower. It will arise as a simple aha moment, an awareness, a recognition of that which was already known. And to just reinforce that a little bit further, I wanted to just share a couple of things you may have heard of. These. There's a couple of quotes I'm going to put in the comments here, and then I'm going to pop them on the screen and speak to them. There we go. You might know the Simon and Garfunkel song, The Boxer. And one of the lines in that, I don't know if that's exact, but basically it says that a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. And actually, we've all done that. We've all been guilty of that. And from a spiritual perspective, what drives that is your worldview, is your belief system. And the thing about spiritual self-realization is that it is beyond and before belief. All beliefs, it turns out, come from what I call the case of the belief in the case of mistaken identity. The belief that all you are is this body-mind, and every other belief system in this world is actually just a subset of that belief. And you don't need to believe me on that. It will be seen. Every belief, because that belief basically is a belief in separation from the universe. And I often use, as you've probably seen many times from you, this fiber optic lamp metaphor, where we think of ourselves as the body mind, this point of light here at the end, and all the other body minds are separate. But actually all the points of light, the pure state of beingness, is all coming from one source. And the power behind that, in this case, is the battery, the infinite silence, which is actually everywhere. And so if you believe yourself to be that, this is creating a sense of separation inwardly from the rest of the universe. And every other belief set stems from that. So it's nothing to do with your beliefs, and your beliefs drive what you will hear intellectually. But if there's a openness within to the not knowing, and not trying to jump to any conclusion about life, about this realization, then this part of hearing what you want to hear and disregarding the rest will automatically and effortlessly dissolve. And then there's a second quote, which I particularly liked when I heard it first many years ago. And I'm going to pop that in the comments now so I can put it on the screen. And there it is. There we go. And this one is from somebody you might have heard of. I think it was possibly in the 80s or 90s. I can't remember when this came out and the specific event. But it's by a guy called Alan Greenspan, who was, I think, the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the USA. And I'll read it out. It says, "I know you think you understand what you thought I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant." And that's really another way of phrasing that quote from the Simon and Garfunkel song, because what we hear at the intellectual level is coming from our conditioned mind and the beliefs that we're holding onto. And so we're only ever from that space going to see part of the picture, whereas the infinite awareness sees all of it. So this is also why when I'm talking about spiritual self-realization, I'll use a term inner standing, which is the inner version of understanding. And what that is an attempt to do is to move one beyond a cognitive understanding, coming from the space of the intellect and mind, to an arising of the knowing that's actually already present in you. It's much more like a resonance, much more like an aha moment, much more like an oh my gosh moment. All of these ultimately arise from within. They don't come through that process there. They arise from within. There's suddenly this seeing, this recognition, this realization. And you can feel it actually in the physical form. It's light, it's inviting, it's uplifting, it's expansive. Whereas the jumping to conclusions, the thinking one knows energy is actually contracting. It's focusing on your belief systems, and it's actually rooted also in a fear. And that the root of that fear, by the way, is the fear that the greatest fear that humanity has, which is its own demise. The greatest fear in self-realization is the fear of the demise of the ego. And it equates that with the death of the physical form. And that is a portal, actually, passing through that fear in the space of trust in the awareness is an entry point, is the fundamental, indeed, entry point to the realization of the self. So we have to, if we're truly sincere about opening to the peace that's within, the peace that passeth all understanding, that was used in the Christian context, it is a peace that passeth all understanding. It cannot come from intellectual knowledge. It is only an arising that emerges from the infinite silence, which is an infinite field of energy that is limitless. And the peace is not an event-based peace. It is not time-bound. It is not space-bound. It is not form-bound. It is just the natural perfume of this awareness that knows itself to be whole, complete, perfect, eternal, untouched, unblemished. And it's expressing itself in your form, in my form, in this beautiful space I'm in right now. And it chooses to express itself, to come to know itself in its own experience. And you won't get there by jumping to conclusions or thinking that you know. You'll get there by realizing that you non-personally are already there as this awareness. That's it. It is ultimately profoundly simple. So just to reiterate, being open to not knowing. The person will never know. No person ever got enlightened. All that happened was that a realization took place that they weren't ever the person, that they were in fact infinite silence or infinite awareness or infinite consciousness. And yes, this expression was here, but it's a vehicle through which life was using to come to know and experience itself. For without this form, without being, without space, and without time and contrast, there is no experience. And so the universe creates this experience for itself. And so we have to drop the idea, let that dissolve completely with the power of awareness, and then with that humbleness and openness, the realization of the self can flower. Not knowing, not thinking one knows, because thinking is believing. Just simply being completely open, empty, letting all of that you think you know about life, all of those beliefs, all of those ideas, all of those concepts are utterly meaningless. And in the openness to the not knowing, then this creates a deep entry point for the realization to flower. I'll often use as an example of this a UK TV comedy series that was, I think, 80s, 90s. For those who are watching overseas, it was called Fawlty Towers, and the principal character was a guy called John Cleese, you've probably heard of. And there was a Spanish waiter played by a very good English actor, and he was always given this phrase by the hotel owner, John Basil Fawlty, of saying, "I know nothing." And so his catchphrase was, "I know nothing." And it was always done in a very sort of humorous way. And for those at the UK audience, you'll know what I mean by Manuel's catchphrase. And actually, that is actually really very important as far as spiritual self-realization is concerned. I know nothing. It adds a lightness to it, but also with sincerity that you don't actually know, and you will never know as a person. the realization of the self can flower. And if it is peace that you seek, and you do seek that, whether you think that you do or not, then this is really, really central. It's nothing to do with believing what you perceive Philip to be saying, or what you may think that you understand by that. And it's everything to do with that which is already known by you as infinite silence, as infinite awareness, to flower. It's like that. One has nothing to learn about this, only to realize what was already known for eternity. For eternity. So it turns out conclusions, in as far as this are concerned, are actually suffering. Conclusions are suffering. Not knowing, in its deepest and highest way, is realization. So be wary of conclusions in life, not just in the practicalities of everyday life, but if you're really opening to and choosing to open to the calling of your heart, then being comfortable with not knowing is a beautiful entry point. The other way is a very rocky road, jumping to conclusions. You can still get there, it's just a lot tougher, and because life will kind of smack you around the head, so to speak, to make you listen. And that's much tougher as an experience, and it doesn't have to be so difficult. It can actually be much more graceful. You're still going to have to face all of the baggage, all of the beliefs, and be prepared to let those go. But the process can be much smoother by being open to the not knowing and the trusting of the higher power, the higher awareness that's within. Not knowing is ultimately realizing, and that's the peace. It will be found, realized there. It's so powerful and so simple in the end. So powerful and so simple. And that also relates to the second part of the video, where several people jumped to conclusions yesterday. I talked about it. The second part of the title yesterday was Falling into the Mystery. And there's a reason why that term is used in the context of spiritual self-realization. Because often people will report to me as they're opening to this a sense of falling into a void or an infinite space. Eventually that phenomenon drops, but the reason that appears as a phenomenon is it's the falling away of the identity, the falling away of the belief systems. And so the mind senses this and is hanging on and doesn't want this falling away to happen. But as that is simply watched from the space of awareness, and the awareness is trusted and not the phenomenon, that sense of falling away also dissolves, and one realizes one is the infinite field of consciousness or infinite awareness. So there were very good reasons for the title yesterday, even though, as I say, a few people, even before I'd started speaking, jumped to conclusions about what it was about, thinking that what was about to be said they already knew when they didn't. So be open to not knowing. We've all jumped to conclusions, we've all done it. It's a part of the human experience. It's a part of, shall we say, the suffering that we create for ourselves. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, nothing right with it, but you're just going to suffer from it, that's all. So, reminder once again, in the not knowing, in the trusting of the universe itself as infinite silence, infinite awareness. That's where the realization flowers. Because there's a great expansiveness in that not knowing. You might want to try this little exercise just now. Just close your eyes for a moment. And just inside, say to yourself, what if I knew nothing? What if I know nothing? What if I know nothing? And see what comes for you. Maybe you'll get some fear, and if that arises, then that's an invitation to let that fear dissolve and be witnessed from the silence. Maybe you'll get a sense of expansiveness. Whatever emerges, just witness that. That's a very simple meditation, and it's yet another version of another short one I use, where I invite people to close their eyes and say, who am I without memory? It's just another version of that one. Who am I without memory? Try that one. Who am I without memory? This is also the not knowing. I'm glad to hear that, Lee. I'm just going to pop that comment on there. That's very important, because what that says to me, what speaks to me there, is the willingness and openness to that possibility. It's not more right or wrong than a different experience than somebody else has. But that expansiveness is an indicator of coming from a place of stillness, of silence, of truth. Same for yours, Rita. Yeah, if, say, some fear arose and what have you, that's not bad. It's simply an invitation to let the power of awareness dissolve that. So there's no right or wrong in this. So be open to not knowing, really, and mean it. Fantastic. Just want to share that comment from Lindsay. So what does this tell us from Lindsay, Rita's, Lily, Lay, and maybe over Malcolm's experience there as well? Which feels more resonant for you? This one, or going with the mind, the thoughts, the beliefs? Let me guess. It's this one, going with the not knowing, the purity, the innocence. I like the way you've used the eyes of a young child, because one of the phrases I will use in Spiritual Self Realisation, the return to yourself. It's like that song, was it by Enigma? The return to innocence is the return to yourself. Listen to that song. It's beautiful, by the way. But this self is non-personal awareness. Infinite silence, infinite consciousness. Use this as a principle in daily life, not knowing. Even things that you might think that you know about. Maybe just open that there's another perspective here, another possibility here, another whatever. See where that also leads you. It's very creative energy, this, by the way. It's a very creative energy, and that's why another reason why children are so creative. Therein is a deep expansiveness, opportunity, and very powerful energy in not knowing. Life can unfold in quite magical, mysterious ways from this space. And if you're truly open to life being like that, then being in this space is actually very, very powerful. Very powerful. And it doesn't require you to believe a single word I say. How good is that? Yeah, it's just a realization. So that's pretty much everything I was going to share. I think Jolene, who's been managing the stream at various watch parties and so forth, has possibly posted a couple of links. But if you want to explore spiritual self-realization further and are feeling called, then I've done lots of online events in the last year for obvious reasons. But this Friday, I've got the second of a series of spiritual inquiry calls on Zoom. You have to register. And the link is, I think, there in the comments. Let me see if I can spot it amongst the ones that... Oh, there it is. Yeah, that one. There's a comment there that's got that. If you're feeling called, and this Friday at 8 p.m. UK time, you can come along and ask your questions. And by the way, all of the questions come from this space. And with a simple change in perspective, we can start to see deeper and move into the not knowing. So if you feel called to that, there are still spaces you can register. Unfortunately, all the scholarship spaces have gone. And I think the support level spaces have gone. But if anybody is struggling financially, just let me know and we can sort something out. So that's this Friday. And then also to say, on my YouTube channel, in the not too distant future, we're getting quite close to launching it now. There's going to be a program of at least 60 more self-realization videos being issued twice a week. I think it's going to be a Tuesday and a Friday, from 3 minutes to half an hour. All there available for free. And if you see the comment in the comments here where you're watching, the one where it says youtube.com Philip Wade location sub underscore confirmation equals 1, that allows you to subscribe to the channel. And I think if you click the notification bell, you get notified. So look out for those. And then there's another comment here. Just sharing. Not knowing. So much more lightness. I think I will create a picture today with that phrase on. Feels an important message to me. Good. Do that, Lee, and perhaps share it with me as well. Always useful for good supporting pictures and comments for the insights that I share. So yeah, do that. I like that as an idea. And somebody else has put wow, so that must have had some resonance for them as well. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it really from oh, I didn't intend to do that. I intended to hide the comment. Not knowing is really a key entry point to spiritual self-realization. Use that little meditation. What if I knew nothing? It's the same as the one, who am I without memory? Just another way of expressing it. So look out for those videos. Subscribe to the channel if you feel called. Register for the stream this Friday if you're feeling called. It's on Zoom. I think that's pretty much it. I'll leave you with some harp music, and I'll see if there's any other comments or questions that pop up. But if they don't, see you again soon. And remember, you don't know. This harp track I'm going to play is called Seeking. It's by my friend Tara Cook and recorded by her husband Ken. And I'll leave you with that. And if there's any other comments or questions, I will come back. Actually, I saw a couple of really useful experiences come up, so I've decided to come back on, and I'll go back to the other one in a moment. But Christine here's experience was a falling away from conditioning and the computer mind. Exactly, Christine. And that, I'm sure, in the body is a much more expansive and beautiful place to be than being with the identity and the conditioning and the thinking space. And this one I particularly liked as well. I don't know the name because on certain aspects of Facebook, StreamYard requires you to give approval for your name, but whoever you are, thanks for sharing this. Just that it's a relief to consider I don't know, because thinking that I did brought no peace. Exactly that. So whoever shared that, that is a wonderful awareness and a wonderful realization for you to have. And recognizing that and embracing that is going to take you much further and much faster. So buckle your seatbelt, so to speak, your spiritual seatbelt, and be open to that. Because if truly peace for to arise, then we need to be, we're going to benefit much more by being in this space. So I just wanted to come back and draw out those two comments further because they were both very important. And I think some of the watch parties were probably behind when I started, so that's why. So I'll leave you all with that again, and I'll give you another blast of the harp and send you many blessings. And I know nothing. There's the space to be. So we'll close the stream in a moment, folks. Thank you for watching.